Alright, it's your boy No Tail Ninja back at it again with another video, and hopefully this one is out relatively in time after the release, hopefully within a week, because as I said in my last couple videos, my job has been working me like crazy, but the money's looking good though, so I can't complain. But looking at like 40 hours extra overtime, I've been exhausted. And anytime I do have free time, I forget that I have like people in my life, so like I have to sometimes dedicate and reorganize some stuff. So YouTube I've been a little slacking lately. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best to catch up, and hopefully work will slow down soon. And also for some reason YouTube like suppressed my last review, so if you guys didn't see it, don't think I skipped to 418 out of nowhere. I did do a 417 review, but for some reason YouTube just barely showed it to anybody. So make sure you go check that out. But for right now, we got another banger of a chapter and a return of a character I'm a little bit conflicted about, but I think it was necessary, and as well as another really intense chapter with Deku continuing his arc with Shigaraki, and I still think it's being beautifully done, but we're gonna get into it. But before I do, make sure to like and subscribe, because eventually I would like to do this rather than doing what I currently do. So help a bro out and make sure to like and subscribe. Help me grow this channel. So far I've been really appreciative of everyone that's helped me so far, and they just keep on chugging along. I still have videos I'm working on, I just gotta get the time right. But let's get into talking about this chapter review. So we pick up from the remainder of last chapter after Deku broke into Shigaraki's court. So now we get to actually see him witness the darkest memory of Shigaraki's past, which is the day he decayed his family. And Deku is looking upon the horrific sight of the moment that Shigaraki accidentally decayed his dog. Now he tries to run out to him and get it to stop, but it's already in motion. And while he's still processing what's happening, he realizes that this is the first time he activated decay. But then he hears his sister calling him, and he's starting to put two and two together of what happened, as the sister freaks out at the sight that is their dog. And as Shigaraki goes to reach out to her like he remembered him doing in the past, Deku actually comes in between him and grabs directly onto Shigaraki's hand. And he starts to decay his hand, but Deku realizes that they're in a dream world, so all he needs to do is keep focusing on his hand and it will remain intact. Which, I kind of wonder if that's actually how you counter decays. It's just sheer willpower. Imagine that was it the whole time. But anyway, that aside, we see that Deku's hand is still technically being decayed while it's happening. It's just happening at a much slower rate. And as he thinks to himself, I have to use my own body, Shigaraki's wondering why he's even doing this, but he says, because you're crying. And Shigaraki is thinking to himself, is like, no, I chose this. I chose to destroy that house and my own family of my own volition. Otherwise, why would I even have these hands? Who would be able to explain why I was born this way? And wait till he finds out potentially why he was born this way. But Deku realizes he's at the weakest part of Shigaraki's personality, so he can't let go no matter what. Because though he's repelling him, he can feel that Shigaraki or Tenko's personality is wavering during this struggle. And Shigaraki's thinking about every negative thing that's happened to him in this world, especially with everyone leaving him abandoned when he was a child and not helping out to him. And Deku is still trying his hardest to fight as much as he can, but he realizes that Shigaraki's too strong. But just as things look like it's about to go the other way and his hand starts to get decayed, he said he remembers the moment where he felt at ease that someone held his hand. And just as Shigaraki starts to decay his hand, he says, that's why I'm here. As they both just bump heads together and just lay there, and I think this is the end of their internal struggles. And Shigaraki goes back to the day he remembers playing with his friends before his decay quirk activated, and they tell him, hey, you should be All Might Chan, as he remembers that positive time in his life. But just before he can accept this new reality that is his world, he remembers that, no, I'm a villain and I must destroy things. As he begins to form back into his original Shigaraki state, but a little bit more crumbled than we're used to, it doesn't seem very stable. And he says, even if all my hatred went away and I turned into an empty shell, I still need to become a hero to those guys, the villains, which I think is a very interesting perspective, but Shigaraki's barely able to keep himself together in this form, meaning that potentially the hatred that has become the core or the shell that is Shigaraki is starting to fall apart. And seemingly enough, people around the world are watching this battle and actually rooting for Shigaraki, which is an interesting perspective that I also never thought about, that other people who are affected by the system can also be rooting for the bad guys, even though their plan is just to destroy everything. But in the real world, we see that the finger cocoon that Shigaraki had originally created is starting to vanish, and it looks like it's going well for the heroes at this point. When suddenly Shigaraki gets a random memory that isn't his, as he sees his father walking down the street as someone says, Shimura-san. He's like, oh, you're that guy from that construction company. As the person he's talking to apparently goes on to ask him about lower back pain and trying to introduce him to a doctor, weirdly enough. But Shimura-san doesn't seem interested, and the flashback continues in another vision. as Shigaraki's father is now having dinner with us, and Shigaraki's realizing that this memory is not his, as the person he's having dinner with asks him random questions like about Shigaraki, weirdly enough, about has he manifested his quirk, and his father goes on to tell him that he hasn't manifested it yet, and the person they're talking to, both Deku and Shigaraki, are wondering what exactly they're looking at here, as All For One erupts from the floor, swallowing Shigaraki whole, as he tells him, "Oh, you foolish vessel, this nobody of a boy made you have a change of heart? You want to become stronger without even getting rid of your weakness? What a fool, Tenko Shimura. To this day, you've never made a single decision of your own." As the chapter comes to an end, and oh my god, so much to talk about here. But first, before I get into that, you know the deal, let me give this chapter an overall rating, and I think I want to go with an 8 out of 10 for this one. It was pretty good, but last chapter really had me going, and I thought that was such a strong emotional chapter. This one was still pretty nice, and we got a lot of perspective on Shigaraki's mental state and thoughts that he has, and a different perspective on how he sees the world versus how everyone else sees the world. But it just wasn't as like grabbing or as like touching as the last chapter was, but still pretty good. And I'm gonna touch on that in a minute, but I do gotta talk about the crazy ending of the chapter first, because I can't just not talk about that. And that is All For One's return, which those of you who've probably been watching the channel for a while know I'm not the biggest fan of All For One. But one of the things I do stand by is that I don't think his story should have been completed when he fought Bakugo. Though I believe that was an amazing fight and it's still one of my top favorite scenes in the anime or manga, I don't think that it really culminated or finished All For One's story, because him and Yuichi need to come to a resolution about their issues. And I also feel like I should say this, the only reason why I don't like All For One, because I know I bring it up all the time but I don't really explain or elaborate all too well, it's just that I kind of wanted a little bit more out of his character when he was first initially introduced to the story. You kind of got the vibe that he was going to kind of shake up the villain formula and be this unique thing where he's actually not trying to be the main villain. He's actually trying to pass the mantle down to somebody else, which I thought was going to be very unique for a villain, like someone actually training his protege while our character is training their protege. But then it just turned out to be that he was trying to possess him the whole time, and then I thought maybe All For One maybe suffered some trauma or something to that degree, so when I found out his backstory was just that he was born evil, I was very underwhelmed. So just to put that out there, that is the reason why I don't like him. I know someone's probably going to debate me in the comments about that, but I'm just putting it out there. But all that aside, I do actually like his return to the story, and I do think that Shigaraki being saved by Deku would have been a very underwhelming ending, which I think I mentioned in my last video, that I don't want it to just end here because I feel like there's so much still left. And I think All For One coming back can potentially be the catalyst to bring all those things back. Like so many of the characters we haven't seen, so many of the fights that I think we still need to see happen. I think so much of that can happen here, and I'm actually super excited for this, and I thought him coming back would be something I hated, but no, I actually like this, and I'm being genuine with this. And also now we almost have 100% confirmation of the whole All For One gave Shigaraki decay theory. I know that there's still the scene that is very debated because it's not really in the anime, but the scene where a man that basically looks exactly like All For One brings Shigaraki home, and then that same night he activates decay. And it could have potentially been the reason why Shigaraki's whole life spiraled this way, because what are the odds that he just randomly ran into Nana Shimura's grandson? It seems 100% premeditated. And of all the theories from MHA that have come out, there's been some wild theories, I think this one always had a ton of credibility in my eye, but I just didn't want to treat it like it was fact. And this is also something, All For One's return and this reveal is something I wanted to make a video on, but I just never got the time to. But I'm going to throw out a couple predictions, and I feel like they're going to come true, so you could come back at this video and at me or whatever when it doesn't. But I guarantee all the vestiges are going to make a return. I think that's an easy slam dunk. I do think to some degree the American heroes will probably enter the scene, because I don't necessarily know how Deku is going to combat this. And I think Overhaul will also make a return because we haven't seen his return. And obviously Eraserhead is going to come back into the story at some point. I don't know what the hell all that's about. I kind of wonder if when Eraserhead and Kurogiri got teleported, if they weirdly teleported to America, where you can potentially see the My Hero Vigilante crew over there. I'm just throwing that out there. That could be a thing. And lastly, I'm throwing into the ring that Deku will eventually give every single hero the ability to use One For All. And I think that's 100% going to happen. I almost want to guarantee that's going to happen. And I believe the vestige that is Shimura Tenko will eventually go into Deku, which will end up rectifying the whole situation of how do you necessarily stop someone like Shigaraki, because with his vestige contained inside of him, he can still live on without technically dying, and Deku can eventually kill All For One because he has no reservations about killing All For One, at least not that he's seemed to have shown in the past. And one thing I want to add, especially with the whole Vestige World thing, with that they mentioned in the last chapter, that if you suffer damage in the Vestige World, it also happens in the real world. So now that Deku's lost his arm, has he lost it in the real world? And how will he end up getting back his quirks? Will Shigaraki give it back to him? Or will, now that the hatred that is Shigaraki taking his quirks has fallen apart, will the other vestiges be free to return back to Deku? Because I don't really see how he can win in this battle right now, because he's literally quirkless and he's fighting a much more dangerous threat, in my opinion, than Shigaraki ever was. Or will we see the moment that I've been waiting for, is when Deku receives Star and Stripe's quirk? Because Deku will not have that drawback that Star and Stripe had, where she didn't necessarily know the user's name because he was operating with 2 personalities at the time. Or will, there just be something else? Will Deku get new quirks? Will Deku have no quirk? Will Deku just die in this moment? I doubt that will happen, but, a lot of things left up in the air right now that I am super excited to see. But I put my predictions out there, so hopefully one day I can come back and quote this video if they do come true or they don't come true, but who knows. But anyway, that's all I got to say on this one. Thanks again for all the love and support y'all have been showing me lately. Make sure to watch all my other videos, and make sure you guys stay safe, my ninjas. I'ma see you in the next one. Peace.